Across the UK, this is Broadcast Revolution's Radio Road Trip.
Hi, and welcome back to Broadcast Revolution's Radio Road Trip. I'm Shelley, and I'm very fortunate today to be joined by Lorna, the station manager at Time 107.5. Hi, Lorna, how are you?
Hi, Shelley, I'm very good, thank you.
Good. Right, I'm going to jump right in. Obviously, you know, with the pandemic that we've been going through, there's been a real kind of looking at the local stories of the good things that people are doing for their communities.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's kind of increased the exposure of that on radio stations. Do you think that's something that's going to continue?
Well, to be honest, we've always really championed the positive stories, and we've got a lot of really good charities around here. We do a lot of programming with the charities. As a local station, that's really important. So we've always done a lot of that type of stuff anyway. So I can't say it's going to be more, but of course it's going to continue. And charities, in all honesty, really need a lot of help at the moment because most of them have had all their events cancelled. So they're looking at different ways of fundraising. We've had our breakfast show at the moment sponsored by a really generous local company just to raise money for some local charities. So that's the sort of thing that's happening now. I think some of the business people in the area that are quite sort of generous and philanthropists are helping the local charities because they can see how much they need them. They need it. Having all their events cancelled has absolutely crucified some of the bigger charities.
Yeah. As in, we've seen a lot of with the charities, and they've struggled obviously with the funding, and it's completely kind of changed it. So I think, you know, with whatever you can do to help get that exposure.
Exactly, and it's you know, it's what our audience want to hear about, things like that. It's more important to them what's going on. In some ways, I mean, I know obviously the NHS is a really massive, important thing, but they can turn on the telly and hear about that on the news. They can't hear about their local hospice or their local mental health charity on the national news. So that's what we do.
So obviously, as you'd already said, you know, local's really important to you, and you've always kind of been doing local stories about people in the community. So would you say that local case studies are more important to you than celebrities?
Yes, definitely. I mean, people can find out about celebrities in lots of different ways, and we want stuff to be relevant. We've got obviously some famous, our area covers the Towie area, so there's some celebrities around here that are sort of relevant. We'd be more likely to do a story on Gemma Collins than we would on Angelina Jolie, because people want to tune in and hear something that's relevant to them, even if it's not that relevant. So yeah, it's all about keeping it relevant to our local audience and doing stuff that other people don't do.
And on that point, would you then, for celebrity wise, if you do take them, obviously you said you take the likes of Gemma Collins because obviously she lives in your area, but would you kind of only take celebrities if they were Essex based?
No, of course not. I mean, if they're a massive name and they want to do something with us, that's great for us.
Yeah.
The bigger they are, the better they are. We do interviews all the time with different celebrities, and we done one today with Steve Hurley from Cockney Rebel. I mean, he's not local, but he's relevant to our audience. We probably wouldn't maybe interview a big grime star or something because it's just not music that's relevant to our audience. But anything that we think is relevant to our audience, But news-wise, we don't really follow like Hollywood celebrity stuff really, unless it's really newsworthy, but they can hear that anywhere, can't they, people?
Yeah, exactly. No, definitely. So obviously, you know, things have kind of come to a halt throughout this period, and everything's been adapted. Are you kind of forward planning to big events like Christmas and thinking about if obviously things aren't back to normal and how that will work kind of for you?
So we do two big things a year. We do Give a Child a Christmas, which is just a really simple thing where we ask our listeners to bring toys in and we distribute them to children's charities in the area. And we get over 5,000 toys most years. We really do help a lot of kids. And we've been doing that for 21 years. And we've had to rethink it this year because we don't want to be in a position where we're encouraging people to go out shopping if the risks are high. But what we also don't want to do is stop the shops around here benefiting from the people buying the toys. So we've come up with a way, we've sort of teamed up with the Romford Business Improvement District, which is, I don't know if you know what BID is, it's an area that they run the Romford Town Centre. So we've teamed up with them, and we're going to this year try and ask people to donate money instead to a GoFundMe page, and then the town ambassadors who work for the BID are going to go out and buy the toys for the people. That way it's less people going out, and we've got quite an older listenership, and some of the older people that come in with the toys, you wouldn't really want them to feel guilted into going out and buying a present. So they can either drop money into us and we'll put it into the GoFundMe, or do it online. We're still going to have 3,000 children to find presents for, because we have that every year. So we've somehow or the other got to find those toys. So yeah, we are doing a big rethink. When the lockdown started last time, we was in the middle of our Easter campaign, which is the same principle but with Easter eggs. It's called Be a Good Egg. But we was in the middle of that, and a lot of the charities and the social workers and stuff all stopped. So we was left with a lot of Easter eggs that we couldn't get out to the children. We don't want that to happen again. So worst case scenarios, the way we're going to do the Christmas one, we will be able to just give some money to the charities that normally collect the toys, like Women's Aid are one of the big recipients of the toys normally. So we know worse ways. If it all went into lockdown, we could give them some money. They would make sure the kids had a good Christmas. So that's what it's all about.
As in that sounds like a really lovely project. And in terms of like on the station in your programming, do you kind of spend a lot of time on the different shows talking about it?
Massive, yeah. It takes over the station from November to mid-December. It takes over the station. Everything's about Give a Child a Christmas. We produce a video for it. Like, we have a real lot of fun with it. We're always lucky to get businesses in the area supporting it as well. We get different drop-off points, which again this year we're not going to be able to do because people don't want thousands of random people coming into their business. At the moment, things seem to be a bit okay, but you just don't know. We could go into another lockdown in December, so we still got to get those kids those toys. So that's the safest we can do it. If people turn up with toys, we'll still take them, because we have people that collect them all year for us and turn up as soon as we start. They turn up with a big trolley full of toys and say, I've been buying one a week. For all year people do that. So we get really massive response, and it's important that we still do it. So we've had to really rethink about how we're going to do that.
So then would you say kind of during that time, like thinking obviously from a PR perspective of people like sending you stories, is that a kind of time where you wouldn't really be taking other things because you're mainly focusing on that?
No, we still take, the news is the news. So the news always goes on, and, the Give a Child a Christmas doesn't interfere with the news stuff. So we will always do that. But programming on the station, a lot of our chats, a lot of our interviews and stuff are to do with Give a Child a Christmas. So we'll be interviewing people from the charities. Sometimes people, like, we get individual families that are really in trouble. We've had people where, like, one of the parents might be dying and the other parent can't work, but they've still got presents to get for their kids. And people are so generous, people just say, I'll buy their kids them presents. They want a bike, they've got a bike, and we tend to get interviews with people that are doing that stuff. So it's lovely, it's really nice. We just can't not do it. So we've had to think about how we can do it and prepare just in case there is a lockdown.
Okay, well, that's great. In terms of Corona as well, obviously, there's been a lot of people looking for experts and guidance and that kind of thing. Have you kind of seen that on your station, and do you think moving forward that is something you'll look to have more on in the future?
See, if I'm honest, we do try to utilise local experts. It's all very about being local for us, and we get pitched from all different people. Like, we've got an expert on finance here to talk about this story, but I might have someone who's an advertiser who's a financial consultant. So I would always go to them first. So we always try and utilise the local experts. We don't mind covering stories that people are pitching to us, but we will say, actually, we'll use our expert for that story, because we can normally find someone, and it's important, especially if it's an advertiser who's spent thousands of pounds on an advertising campaign, and then all of a sudden we've got some other expert on air. So we always try, and we've got a directory of local experts on different things that we try and use. But
go to
that's
interesting.
With the Corona stuff, we probably use mostly national people on that. We was getting from different people, because it was, are there any experts on it?
Well, exactly. No one really knows, do they? But
no, right.
I guess it's interesting to hear that you kind of have your bank of local experts, because obviously we work with different people and have all kind of like national, let's say, experts, but actually it's interesting to hear about how having local experts within different regions is kind of more better for you guys, because it's keeping it local, and you're also kind of, I guess, supporting those businesses through doing that.
And it makes it more relevant for a local station. If I'm talking to an expert on finance who's in Edinburgh and we're putting that live on air, it's not the same as talking to one that's from Ilford. Just everything about that is better for a local station, really, unless it's a subject that's really broad. But a lot of the time we get, some of our main advertisers, I think we've got 6 estate agents that advertise with us. So if we get pitched a story about the property market, why am I going to go to a random estate agent when I've got all these experts already? Plus it will upset my advertisers, so we don't.
And you know what, that makes it makes complete sense. It would be silly otherwise. Okay, so this is a funny one. So if you had to pitch to you, how would you go about doing it?
If you
had to pitch to yourself a story to get on air,
on our station, it's got to have a local angle. It's got to have a local angle. If you phoned me up and said to me, oh, we've got a story on a school in Birmingham, and then all of a sudden you said, but a local school near you in Chadwell Heath is doing the same thing, then it's interesting. If it's not, if there's no relevant local link, it's not that interesting, unless it's really funny story. Sometimes a funny stories. You know, we also do a thing called the Big Breakfast Debate, so we're always looking for light-hearted things on the breakfast show. So, you know, I think this morning they was talking about, yesterday morning, because of the driverless cars thing, they was talking about where would you go if you had a driverless car. You know, so that's not obviously a national thing, it's not local to us, but it's light-hearted. So it either has to be light-hearted or have a local connection. Both is brilliant.
And then what about if you've got all these local stories that are at your fingertips? What makes one stand out over the other, would you say?
Oh, God. Having someone if it's for the news, having someone who can do an interview with us on it. And again, if that's a local person, that's even better. So that would be the top of the three, having a good connection with a local area or a local story and a good local expert on the story is gold. That's the best.
Okay, that's great. What would you say the best thing about local radio is?
I think it's the being so accessible to our listeners. I mean, for us as well, we're based in a shopping centre, so our studios, the windows of our studios look out into the shopping centre, so people walk past and they'll knock on the window like it's not soundproof, which of course it is. But it's people know where we are, they know who we are. People treat us like family, and our listeners are so loyal. They really do listen we've actually got the longest listening hours in the country. So our listeners listen for longer than any other one in the country. Consistently, we've been in the top 4 or 5, normally sort of radio stations on like the Isle of Wight or the Isle of Man sometimes beat us but we are again at the top of that at the moment. We've got an average listening hours of about 14 a week, which compared to some of the national stations, it's like 4 a week, you know, so we're by a long way because people put us on in the morning, they stay with us all day. And it can be a little bit freaky as well sometimes. I'm not even on air, but I'll be at an event or something, then someone will come up to me and say, how was your wedding? I don't really know about my wedding. Because they know, they feel like they're part of your family, and I think that's what's special about it. And it also gives advertisers and people that are promoting stuff something special because our listeners really do trust us.
So what would you say, because I like that makes sense to me, like your listeners, you know, they're the priority and you've got these loyal listeners. What do you try and get for them? Like if you could say like 3 things that you try and get on there for them, what would those things be? Information,
entertainment and friendship. You know, we want to be their friend, we want to entertain them, and we want to give them the correct information. So even our adverts are to us information. When we get to coming up to Christmas and stuff, we get a lot of national adverts on and we get complaints. Oh, you've got too many adverts on. We can have the same amount of local adverts on and nobody minds because they view it as information. Because it's nice for them to hear, oh, there's a new shop opening, or, oh, that pub's doing specials on this. If it's local, they don't view it as an advert. It's part of their family.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, actually. That's a good point about the adverts. Do you have a lot of advertising within the station? Yeah,
I mean, we do 3 breaks an hour. Each break is 3 minutes, so there's 9 minutes every hour. Plus we have sponsorships and also live reads as well. So for events and stuff, like the local fun fairs in town, they're normally just live reads because they're not worth having an advert made for. But and most shows are sponsored. Not all shows are sponsored, but most of them are. That's how we survive.
Okay, and then, you know, obviously we're discussing about Christmas, and there might have been programming changes, obviously because of what's happened, obviously at the moment. Other than Christmas, would you say, is there any insights into the future of like any changes to your programming?
Well, there has been to ours. We're part of a bigger company, and they're making concessions and trying to tighten their belt to make sure they are not losing money. So we've had to cut some shows. Some of our evening shows have been more pre-recorded stuff. I'm hoping to bring it all back, if I'm honest. I don't think there's anything beats listener interaction in a local radio station. So that has been the change. There's been more pre-recorded stuff, but do I want to keep it? No.
Yeah, and like to go back to normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think there's like a timescale on that, or just whenever?
Well, I'm hoping by the 1st of September everyone's back, because we've still got a couple of presenters furloughed. And just because of social distancing, at one point we didn't have all of the presenters in, so we didn't double head the breakfast show, for instance, so the breakfast show host could come in on his own. We did try working from home, didn't really work out. We're not technically advanced enough to probably pull that off. I know some stations have been working from home. We broadcast a few shows from home, but it's still not the same because of the phone calls. The listeners want to phone you up, and it's okay, you can do email and stuff, but people want to talk to you.
So do you have less people kind of working in the studio for the station, like producer-wise, people that are getting the content on air?
We did, yeah. I mean, well, we've only got one programme manager here anyway. All of our presenters are really pretty much self-produced, apart from one on a Sunday who has a producer with him because he's quite old and he just don't get the buttons. But
yeah.
His show was pulled for a while anyway. He's back. And it's just about trying to keep the studio a safe place for our presenters to come in. So there's just little tiny things have changed. Like when, for instance, our afternoon show host, when the drive time takes over from the afternoon show host, the drive time host used to come in and have a chat with him. That doesn't happen now. He lines up some music, he cleans down the desk and leaves, so they're not in that. It's not that small, the studio, but it's just a precaution. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. But then I'm thinking, so obviously your presenters are mostly producing their own shows. When do they produce while they're presenting? How does it kind of work for them?
Both, really. Different shows. Like Dean, who's on at the moment, for instance, he does 2 hours in the afternoon. He doesn't do a lot of. He does some drive time, some school run requests and stuff. He doesn't really have to prepare a lot. Whereas our evening show hosts are a bit more specialist shows, so they might prepare at home and then come in with the prepared stuff for their playlists and things, and interviews sometimes they do at home. Most of them luckily have got studios at home.
Oh, that's good. That works well. That must be nice.
It's just hard to broadcast live from their studio at home. That just wasn't working out too well. We did do a bit of it, like at the very first beginning of lockdown for 3 weeks we did, but you know, everyone was sort of happy to come back in with the social distancing in place, so we come back.
And now it's kind of got to a point where it's not, other than the people that are furloughed and hopefully were coming back, it's not having that much of an impact on you. No,
not on the programming really. We've got a few evening programs that people are now saying, oh, when is that coming back? You know, there's Sunday afternoons are pre-recorded at the moment, and people are saying, oh, we want Mike Stevens back. You know, they like that banter they like. So yeah, it's important that we try and get that back as quickly as possible. But obviously everyone's got to be safe.
Yeah, exactly. So then what would you say is maybe the biggest misconception about local radio?
I think the biggest misconception is that it's almost like a bit sort of corny or like really small sounding and not well produced, and I think that's a big especially for us. I think our production and our quality of sound would stand up against any major radio station. I think people misinterpret local and community. People get those two things mixed up. People think that we've just got volunteers working here, but they're all professional people that are either on their way up or on their way down, if I'm honest. Some of them have had their careers at Capital, and then there's others that want to be in the big thing. So we're middle of the road because we can't afford to pay big money for massive producers. We're only a small station, but so we get them on their way up or on their way down. And I think that's the biggest misconception. Actually, something that's a misconception about radio, I go out and do a lot of talks about radio, about local radio. It's a way of building the audience as well for women's groups and schools and stuff. And so many people think that we get paid to play music. They think that that's how we earn our money, that like the record companies pay us to play their music.
Right.
That's a big misconception. No, we actually have to pay to play their music.
Yes. That is interesting.
Yeah.
And what would you say your funniest moment in radio is?
Oh, God. Liz. There's been quite a lot. But one that really springs to mind, I've actually got a recording of this, and it's hilarious. We had a young apprentice, an apprentice sports journalist who was working here, and he was a bit of a lad, and he'd been to Malia with his friends, he was 19, 18, 19.
Yeah.
And we'd all had bets actually in the office what he was going to come back with. Was it going to come back with a black eye, a criminal record, a tattoo? Like, what was going to happen? Anyway, he's come in, and he came back with his best friend's brother's name tattooed on his ankle, because he'd done that as a dare. I know.
What?
Luckily, it was only a small name. I think his name was Ben, so it was a small name on his ankle.
Right.
So we was all laughing and joking about it, and then the presenter who was on at the time started telling the listeners, but George, our apprentice's mum and dad didn't know, and they was avid listeners.
Oh my
Sort
gosh.
of burst in the studio, even though he was on air, he's burst in the studio and Mark, oh sure. And this has all come out on air, and it was just, Mark just couldn't stop laughing. He was like, well, I didn't know, they didn't know. And he couldn't even, he had to go into the weather, and I remember he was just laughing so much. He went, well, the weather is, yeah, well, it's there.
Did you get them online? Did you get the
Yeah,
parents?
I've got the whole thing. Oh no, and then the mum phoned up, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I knew something was wrong
brilliant.
because he wouldn't take his socks off.
That is a good one, I have to say.
Funny, yeah.
That is really funny. And I think we'll kind of end here. The last one I have is, where do you get your news from?
Well, I have two journalists working 12 hours a day. Like, for the 12 hours, there's two separate journalists working, and they source all our local news. We do take national and international stories from IRM, but we source it all ourselves. I mean, Facebook is a great source, all the local groups in Facebook. But the journalists have got really good connections. People come to us with news now. If there's a crash at the end of the road, people are phoning us up. There's a crash at the end. If someone's house gets raided, we know about it. People phone us up with stories. But yeah, I've got journalists working on it all the time. I think that's really important.
And kind of on that, would you say, in terms of the news side of things, could you give a percentage to, news that they kind of find out about incidences and stuff that goes on in your area, and news that kind of you're given through research and PR stories?
Yeah. So it's probably 70% stuff we find out ourselves and 30% we use from elsewhere. Okay. I mean, the aim is always 100% stuff that we, that we've found out that's local to us. They love the thrill of the chase. They're journalists. They like the thrill of the chase. They want to get stuff online before the local newspapers and all of that stuff. So that's what they're aiming for all the time.
Yeah.
So if companies come to us with a news story, if it is local or got a local relevance, then they can see the bigger picture of using it. If it's not really, they're not so interested.
Well, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining me
You're
today.
welcome.
And I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Yeah. Take care, Shelley.
Thank you, Angie.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Broadcast Revolution's Radio Road Trip. Follow us on Twitter @BroadcastRevo and Instagram @BroadcastRevolution. #Join the Broadcast Revolution.